It was just a few words. Is he mad at me? But they landed like a grenade. Broadcast to millions, those 5 words revealed what no official press release ever would. Something inside Ferrari was broken. In the high-speed chaos of a Grand Prix, Lewis Hamilton should have been locked into strategy mode, calculating every tenth of a second. Instead, he was wondering if the man on the other end of his radio even liked him. It wasn't sarcasm. It wasn't even frustration. It was fear. Fear that his most vital connection on the pit wall had gone cold. And in Formula One, where drivers are strapped into machines capable of 300 kilometers per hour, silence can be as deadly as a crash. The engineer-driver relationship is sacred. It's the lifeline, the clarity in the storm, the invisible partnership that wins championships. And right now, Hamilton doesn't have that. Not even close. At Mercedes, he could finish Bono's sentences. At Ferrari, he's wondering if the man guiding him through the corners is guiding him at all. The problem isn't the radio static. It's what that silence represents. Something deeper, something personal. And with every lap, that invisible tension is growing harder to ignore. But that question, simple, human, devastating, wasn't just about one race. It was about a pattern Hamilton had seen forming for months. Vague instructions during critical moments. Sluggish data delivery when timing mattered most. A cold tone, a clipped voice, the kind of communication that made you feel like a stranger, not a teammate. And Lewis knows what that means. He's raced too long, fought too many battles to mistake awkwardness for accident. In Formula One, every message is intentional, or it should be. So when Riccardo Adami didn't answer fast enough, when the silence lingered, Hamilton's instincts kicked in. Not as a driver, but as a man under fire. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was the beginning of something else, something political, something that could wreck his final shot at greatness. And what came next only made things worse. Inside the cockpit, there's no margin for doubt. The slightest distraction, one uncertain corner, one misread instruction, and a driver loses everything. Lewis Hamilton doesn't just rely on confidence, he needs clarity. That's what made Bono irreplaceable. For over a decade, Pete Bonington wasn't just feeding Hamilton data, he was translating chaos into calm. He knew when to speak, and more importantly, when not to. He could sense fear in Hamilton's voice, fatigue in his breathing. He was more than a strategist, he was a second brain. But the relationship went deeper than anyone realized. Bono understood Hamilton's racing DNA, the way Lewis processed information under pressure, the specific language that calmed his mind during wheel-to-wheel combat, the exact tone needed when strategy was falling apart. It wasn't just professional chemistry, it was psychological symbiosis. When Hamilton asked for gap times, Bono knew he needed confidence. When Hamilton went quiet, Bono knew he needed space. When Hamilton's voice tightened, Bono knew exactly which words would unlock his speed again. That bond took years to build. It survived crashes, championship heartbreak, and the pressure of fighting the most dominant teams in F1 history. It was forged through 1,000 small moments, practice sessions where they fine-tuned not just setup, but communication style, race weekends where they learned each other's rhythm, crisis moments where trust was the difference between disaster and victory. But at Ferrari, that rhythm is gone. Riccardo Adami might have the experience. He might even have the credentials, but he doesn't have the bond. And every second of radio silence makes that painfully clear. The voice inside the helmet doesn't calm Lewis anymore, it confuses him, rattles him. And in a sport where milliseconds matter, confusion is fatal. Hamilton isn't guessing. He can feel it in every turn. The delay before the response. The tone that suggests annoyance instead of urgency. The missing detail when he asks for strategy clarification. These aren't isolated missteps. They're symptoms of a deeper disconnection. When a driver doesn't trust his engineer, he begins to second-guess everything. Tire choices, braking points, even his own intuition. That kind of mental spiral is invisible to the audience. It doesn't show up on the leaderboard. But the telemetry tells the real story. Hesitations, micro-corrections, lines that suggest a driver who's no longer fully in sync with the voice in his ear. Lewis has driven through rain, chaos, crashes, but this slow erosion of trust is harder than anything he's faced. It's not a crash, it's a slow-motion collapse. And when the world tuned in to watch Monaco, the consequences finally exploded into view. Monaco is unforgiving. The walls are tight, the track narrow, and there's no space for doubt. Every corner demands absolute commitment. Every braking zone requires perfect timing. One moment of hesitation, and you're in the barrier. That's why when Hamilton radioed on lap 32, asking for the delta, the exact time gap needed to execute an overcut strategy, he wasn't being cautious. He was being tactical. This was his chance to leapfrog into position, to reclaim control of a race that was hanging by fractions of a second. The strategy was complex but clear. Stay out one lap longer than the cars ahead. Use fresh tyres to gain crucial seconds, then pit and emerge ahead of traffic. It's a move Hamilton had executed dozens of times at Mercedes, but it requires split-second timing and absolute trust between driver and pit wall. All he needed was one number, one clear signal to pounce. The Delta would tell him everything, whether he had enough time to make the overcut work, whether he should push for maximum pace, or conserve tyres for the stint ahead. It was a simple request that required immediate, precise data. But instead, the silence came, and it stayed. For 3 agonizing corners, nothing. Not a beep, not a breath. Hamilton was flying through the most technical section of the Monaco circuit, the swimming pool complex, with no guidance, no confirmations, no assurance that his team even understood what he was asking for. When the reply finally came, it was garbled, late, and strategically useless. "Lewis, we're still calculating," came the delayed response. By then, the window was gone. The cars behind had closed the gap. The strategy collapsed. And in Monaco, where every tenth of a second costs positions, the damage was irreversible. To the average viewer, it looked like a miscommunication, maybe even a simple technical delay, but drivers know better. And Hamilton? He felt the betrayal instantly. The telemetry confirmed it later. His steering was tighter than normal, his exit speed slightly off, his braking more cautious. A driver like Hamilton doesn't lose time by accident. He loses time when he loses trust. And that's exactly what happened in Monaco. But the race wasn't just a failure in tactics. It was a broadcast of the emotional breakdown behind the scenes. While Verstappen's team gave him real-time data, aggressive prompts, and constant strategic feedback, Hamilton was left alone in the dark, trying to make critical decisions with incomplete information. The contrast was brutal, and it didn't go unnoticed. Because while the cameras showed Ferrari's polished garage and rehearsed smiles, inside that team, something had already snapped. Behind every great champion is a voice that guides, not commands. But with Riccardo Adami, there's no partnership, only protocol. To the public, he's just another engineer in red. But to insiders, Adami is something far more complex, a gatekeeper. A man chosen not for synergy with Hamilton, but for loyalty to the Ferrari institution. That's where the rot begins. Because while Lewis came to Maranello with the dream of building something new, he quickly found himself up against a wall of old alliances. Ferrari's engineering department isn't just technical, it's tribal. Relationships that span decades. Loyalties that run deeper than performance. And Adami sits at the center of that web, more invested in protecting the system than adapting to Hamilton's needs. Whispers swirl of cold meetings, clipped conversations, and strategy briefings where eye contact is rare and questions go unanswered. This isn't racing, it's office politics in overalls. And in this game, Adami doesn't just control information, he controls access. The result? Hamilton isn't just fighting for podiums, he's fighting for a voice. Sources close to the team paint a picture of dysfunction that goes far beyond race day communication. In engineering meetings, Hamilton's input is often noted but rarely acted upon. His feedback on car balance gets filtered through multiple layers before reaching the people who can actually make changes. His strategic preferences are discussed in rooms where he's not present, then presented back to him as foregone conclusions. It's not just that Adami isn't Bono, it's that he's the opposite. Where Bono anticipated Hamilton's every move, Adami waits. Where Bono calmed the storm, Adami disappears into it. And worst of all, in moments when Hamilton needs direct, decisive data, he gets silence. It's as if the team is speaking a language he no longer understands. For someone used to intuitive communication, this is chaos. But the most disturbing part isn't what's being said, it's what's being withheld. The feeling that strategy decisions are being made with minimal input from the driver. That conversations are happening behind closed doors where Hamilton isn't invited. It's not open sabotage, but it's close. And for a driver who built his legacy on unity and trust, this isolation is not just unsettling, it's dangerous. And if you think this ends with radio silence, think again. Ferrari has always prided itself on being a family. But for outsiders, that family can feel more like a fortress. When Hamilton arrived, it wasn't just a new challenge, it was a culture shock. At Mercedes, transparency was gospel. Every member of the team, from strategist to suspension engineer, worked in concert. Data flowed freely. Decisions were collaborative. Hamilton was never just the driver, he was part of the decision-making engine. But in Maranello, the lines are drawn in quiet ink. Information is compartmentalized. Loyalty is inherited, not earned. And for Lewis, a driver whose greatness comes from feeling every detail, the wall of silence has become unbearable. It's not just uncomfortable, it's suffocating. The contrast becomes more apparent every race weekend. Every strategy meeting feels rehearsed. Every team dinner, polite but distant. And on race day, the isolation sharpens. While Charles Leclerc receives fast, decisive calls from Xavi Marcos, Hamilton often hears hesitation from Adami, or worse, nothing at all. The psychological impact of that discrepancy can't be overstated. It creates doubt, division, frustration that grows with every lap. Even fans are starting to notice the contrast in energy. The synergy Leclerc enjoys is nowhere to be found on Hamilton's side of the garage. And as rumours mount about political cliques forming behind closed doors, one truth becomes increasingly clear. Hamilton may wear the red suit, but he's not yet part of the red shield. Former Ferrari engineers who've worked with multiple champions describe the phenomenon as institutional memory, the team's unconscious tendency to protect existing relationships over building new ones. It's not malicious, they explain, but it's real. And it's particularly dangerous when the driver in question is someone as experienced and demanding as Hamilton. Lewis knows what championship-level support looks like, explains one former pitwall member who worked with both Hamilton and other Ferrari champions. He's not asking for special treatment. He's asking for the same level of integration and communication that made him successful elsewhere. But Ferrari's structure makes that almost impossible to achieve quickly. And that divide? It's not shrinking, it's growing wider, deeper and more dangerous. But the real threat doesn't scream, it whispers. In Formula One, sabotage rarely looks like a smoking gun. It almost never comes as a dramatic betrayal. It's quieter than that, slower. Like a pinhole in a fuel line, barely noticeable at first, but enough to stop a car from finishing a race. That's what Hamilton is facing now. Not overt sabotage, but something worse, passive resistance. Critical information delivered seconds too late. Vague strategy options that sound like riddles. Change his entire plan without proper explanation. Radio calls that sound more like suggestions than commands. It's death by 1,000 delays. And the telemetry tells the story. Each moment of doubt translates to hesitation on the throttle, a premature brake, a corner taken half a gear too low, tiny losses. But they add up. Every lap, every race. Until suddenly a 7-time champion looks average. The pattern is consistent and disturbing. In qualifying, Hamilton asks for tyre temperature data and gets a response 30 seconds later, long after the information would be useful. During race strategy discussions, his preferred approach gets acknowledged but never implemented. When he requests specific setup changes, they're often diluted or delayed until the next session. To casual viewers, it all blends together. Just racing noise. But insiders, analysts, former drivers, even rival engineers see the signs. This isn't mechanical failure. This is psychological erosion. Hamilton is losing not because he's lost his edge, but because the ground beneath him is shifting. He's being destabilized from within. The most damaging aspect isn't any single incident. It's the cumulative effect. Each non-response chips away at Hamilton's confidence in the system. Each delayed answer forces him to make decisions with incomplete information. Each moment of confusion creates doubt that carries into the next corner, the next lap, the next race. When you're driving at those speeds, trust is everything, explains former F1 driver and current analyst Martin Brundle. If you're questioning whether your engineer has your back, that questioning bleeds into everything else. Suddenly you're not just racing the track, you're racing your own uncertainty. And Ferrari? They're either blind to it, or worse, allowing it. Because in their world, the system always protects its own. Adami's role isn't just technical, it's symbolic. Removing him would be admitting the system failed, and Ferrari doesn't do that, not easily. So Hamilton is left in limbo, waiting for trust that may never come, driving at 200 kilometers per hour with half the information and twice the pressure. And still, he fights. But the time for quiet resistance is ending. A decision is coming, and it could rewrite everything. Every Formula One driver knows that winning requires more than speed, it takes alignment between car, team, strategy and trust. But Lewis Hamilton is discovering that at Ferrari, trust has a cost, one that goes far beyond lap times. If he demands a new engineer, he risks igniting a firestorm behind the scenes. It wouldn't just be a personnel change, it would be a political reckoning. Adami isn't just some name on a headset. He's been at Ferrari for years. He's woven into the team's old guard, a fixture of the Vasseur era, and seen by many as a stabilizing presence in a volatile organization. His relationships extend throughout the engineering department. His removal would send shockwaves through the entire technical structure. Replacing him could be interpreted as Hamilton trying to seize control, not just of his strategy, but of Ferrari's hierarchy. And in Maranello, that kind of move isn't just controversial, it's heresy. The team has a long history of drivers who tried to reshape the organisation to their liking. Some succeeded. Many others found themselves marginalised, their careers quietly undermined by the very institution they thought they could change. But the alternative is even more dangerous. If Hamilton does nothing, if he keeps turning laps while quietly losing trust in the voice guiding him, then the fracture only deepens. The longer he waits, the more he risks becoming isolated. And once a driver loses authority within the team, recovery becomes almost impossible. Ferrari may be saying the right things in public, but behind the scenes, they're watching Hamilton closely. They're measuring not just his results, but his influence. How he responds now will define how much power he really has in the red garage. It's a delicate line, one misstep, and he risks becoming just another hired gun instead of the legend they promised to support. The trap is perfectly constructed. Demand change and risk being labelled as disruptive. Accept the status quo and risk fading into irrelevance. Every path forward feels like a loss. But what if Lewis isn't the one who's cornered? What if he's already planning something far bigger? Ferrari's silence has become its own kind of answer. Race after race, the team insists that communication is improving, that the driver-engineer bond just needs more time. Team principal Fred Vasseur speaks in measured tones about building relationships and finding rhythm. But those words are hollow when measured against what's playing out on the track. Leclerc's radio is alive with strategy, updates, and encouragement. The communication flows seamlessly, naturally, with the kind of intuitive understanding that defines championship partnerships. Hamilton's side? Still haunted by a hesitation and gaps. Still marked by those devastating moments of silence when clarity is most needed. And the emotional toll is mounting. Gone is the driver who radiated calm, who turned every setback into fuel. What we're seeing now is frustration in his body language, confusion in post-race interviews, and laps that fluctuate without clear cause. That's not fatigue, that's disconnection. The media has started to notice. Post-race interviews reveal a Hamilton who chooses his words more carefully, who deflects questions about team communication with practiced diplomacy. But the strain shows in subtle ways: the slight pause before answering questions about strategy, the forced smile when discussing his relationship with the engineering team, the way he emphasizes "we" when talking about the team, as if trying to convince himself as much as the audience. Inside Maranello, the walls are closing in. Hamilton's closest advisors are growing restless. Media allies have started probing questions Ferrari won't answer. And the fans, the ones who dreamed of a fairy tale 8th title, are starting to sense the cracks. This isn't about setup tweaks or mid-season upgrades. This is about something fundamental. A bond that was supposed to anchor Hamilton's final act is disintegrating in real time. And unless something changes, that bond will take the season down with it. The math doesn't lie. Every lost 10th compounds. Every race without alignment moves the title further out of reach. The countdown isn't theoretical anymore. It's visible on the standings. Ferrari may think they still have time, but Hamilton knows better. He can feel the collapse coming. And now, the world is waiting for him to respond. Behind the scenes, Hamilton's team is no longer staying quiet. Sources close to the driver confirm that internal conversations have intensified. Some believe Hamilton has already presented Ferrari with an ultimatum: find a new engineer or risk losing momentum completely. Others suggest he's gone further, proposing a short list of engineers he trusts, including some currently working at rival teams. The names being whispered are telling: Andrew Chauvelin from Mercedes, Guillaume Roquelin, who worked with Red Bull's championship campaigns, even Xavi Marcos, currently working with Leclerc, but with a proven track record of adaptability. Each represents not just technical competence, but the kind of collaborative approach Hamilton thrived with at Mercedes. Whatever the details, the message is clear: the silence must end. Because this isn't just about performance anymore, it's about principle. A 7-time champion doesn't come to Ferrari to be muted. He comes to elevate, to lead, to finish a legacy. And that can't happen when his voice is being ignored. Word is, Ferrari leadership is divided. Some argue it's too soon to make a change, that removing Adami would send the wrong message about stability and commitment. Others privately admit that the partnership isn't working and that something must give. It's a battle not just over strategy, but over control. Team principal Vasseur finds himself caught in the middle, respecting Hamilton's experience while trying to maintain harmony within the existing structure. Sources suggest he's been meeting privately with both Hamilton and Adami, trying to find a compromise that preserves relationships while addressing the communication breakdown. But compromise may not be possible. Hamilton is forcing Ferrari to answer a question they've long avoided. Who really holds the power in this team? The answer to that question could determine the fate of the season, and perhaps the future of Ferrari itself. Because if Hamilton walks, or if he fades into mediocrity, while politics plays out above him, the damage to Ferrari's reputation could be irreversible. It's not just a driver decision anymore, it's a team-defining moment, and Hamilton knows it, which is why his next move may be his boldest yet. Lewis Hamilton has always known how to play the long game. At Mercedes, he built a dynasty not just with pace, but with politics, with relationships, with control. He understood that winning championships required more than just being fast. It required shaping the entire organization around the pursuit of excellence. Now, at Ferrari, he's preparing to do it again. Insiders believe he's ready to issue a final demand before the next race. Not just for a new engineer, but for structural changes, better access to strategy meetings, deeper involvement in race planning, and more control over in-race decision-making. It's a comprehensive power play, and it has to be, because Hamilton understands something Ferrari seems to have forgotten. You don't win championships with machinery alone. You win them with unity, and right now, Ferrari is fractured. The technical team operates in silos. Strategy decisions get made without driver input. Communication flows through too many filters before reaching the cockpit. Hamilton's proposal, according to sources, includes specific organizational changes, direct access to the strategy team during race weekends, a role in selecting his own support staff, more influence over car development priorities, real-time data access that doesn't depend on radio communication. It's not just about changing personnel, it's about changing the entire power structure. If the team refuses, the consequences will be immediate. Hamilton won't implode, he never does, but the tension will leak into everything. Press conferences will grow colder, performance will flatten, and the dream of an 8th title will quietly slip away. But if Ferrari listens, if they take the leap, shift the dynamic, and let Hamilton lead, then something else is possible. Redemption, comeback, history. The story that seemed destined to end in disappointment could still become legend. The precedent exists. Michael Schumacher didn't just join Ferrari, he transformed it. He demanded changes in personnel, structure, and approach. He built the team around his vision of what a championship organization should look like. And it worked. 5 consecutive titles proved that sometimes disruption is the price of greatness. But it all hinges on this moment. One driver, one team, one voice that must be heard again. The silence ends now. And in its place, a storm is coming. This isn't just another rivalry or another upgrade drama. This is psychological warfare in the heart of Formula One's most iconic team. Hamilton's legacy is on the line. Ferrari's future is on the line. And the battle for control is reaching its peak. The next race weekend will tell the story. Will Hamilton take the track with the same hesitant communication, the same gaps in critical information, the same sense of isolation that's plagued his Ferrari experience? Or will we see something different? A driver and team finally aligned, finally working as one unit toward a common goal. The signs are already emerging. Hamilton's recent public comments have grown more pointed, more specific about what championship-level teamwork requires. Ferrari's responses have become more defensive, more careful about promising improvements they may not be able to deliver. Whatever happens, the facade is cracking. The polite diplomacy that's characterized this partnership is giving way to something more honest, more urgent. And in Formula One, honesty often precedes either breakthrough or breakdown. Hamilton knows this is his moment, not just in terms of career achievement, but in terms of historical legacy. The difference between being remembered as a great driver who finished his career gracefully and being remembered as a legend who bent an entire organization to his will in pursuit of immortality. The choice isn't just his anymore. Ferrari must decide what they want more: institutional stability or championship glory, the protection of existing relationships or the pursuit of transcendent success, the comfort of familiar failure or the risk of transformational change. So if you believe there's more to this than Ferrari wants you to see, stay with us. Subscribe. Comment below. Should Hamilton demand the change? Or is the damage already done? This isn't just racing. This is history being written, one tense conversation at a time. And the next race, that's not just a circuit. It's a battlefield. The silent war is ending, and only one side can emerge victorious.